it's Monday, we're closed, but today we are interviewing our next artist, Jarrod Oram, Dallas-based photographer. We have one of his pieces here. The rest will be installed in a couple of weeks. And we're here just to learn more about you and your process and your story, and of course, how you got to where you are. Start with the
speed it up. Yeah.
Start with the title of the title of the show, which I love.
Yeah. Well, first, I couldn't be more excited to work with y'all. I love how the world and the universe operate.
Sure.
I connected with a designer over here that I do work for, and she was like, "You have to meet these people next door to us that have this most amazing Western shop, and that we think that." And they work with artists, and your work would go swimming. I'm like,
yeah,
gold. And then I just came in and met y'all, and like it's been an awesome,
yeah.
It's a very short
time. It's a
love
connection.
It is.
Yeah.
It absolutely is.
Great.
Yeah.
The title of the show is called "You've Been Everywhere But Here," and it's actually the tagline. I'm going through a rebrand of my business right now, and that's really the tagline of my work. Because I started how this all started coming about is that I would just get in my car and drive and see what I could find.
Right.
My mom, she was a photographer. I grew up and she would drive me around in her van, and we would go to museums and antique shops, and she would pull over like at the end of the day and was like, "Look at that light," and I hated all of it. As a child, like a bunch of old, dusty stuff. Yeah. Now, what do I do today?
Exact same thing.
I go to museums. I go to antique shops.
Yeah.
That sense of nostalgia of Americana, of the beauty and the flaws of old.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I would just get in my car and just drive in a direction and see what I could find. And through time of like my love for like Americana and roadside America, but then also stillness, sitting somewhere getting somewhere and there's a truck, like a new truck. So not even like a cool old like vintage truck, some truck that is just like a 2001 teal truck standing in the middle of like this beautiful theater. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm 400 miles away from home. When am I ever going to be out here? I'll wait.
Yeah.
And kind of in the world of kind of personal development that I've done over time and everything, just the idea of sitting and waiting and what can kind of come up and the beauty that can kind of come up. And then that truck leaves and it's gold now. And all of a sudden, like the light's hitting it perfectly. And so, as this became less of a hobby until a year and a half ago, where I got to apply 20 years of my life's work experience on top of a creative eye, I realized that, my clients have been everywhere. They have homes in Aspen. Mm-hmm. They go to Tanzania, Lake Como is like, Jarrod, I'm on 5 fingers. And yet, whenever majority of people see the majority of my work, the first question they ask is, "Where's this?"
Yeah.
And so, for me, of being able to find those stories and then share them, that it's not just me hopping out of the car and taking a photo. Like, my hope is that people can understand what I was feeling while shooting this.
Right.
This photo right here is titled "To Live Is to Fly," and it's in Sheridan, Wyoming, the Mint Bar. I think it's been around since like 1910.
Yeah.
And it's on Main Street in Sheridan. And I was on a 10-day road trip. I flew into Denver to then drive to Glacier for a friend's wedding. And so I knew this was where a lot of times I'll just get in the car and see what I find. There's certain things along the road that I'm like, oh no, this would be really cool. But I got there, it was overcast. And so I went and checked into my Airbnb. And then there was another bar right down the street called the Rainbow Bar, and we'll have a 40 by 50 of that in this exhibit, which will look really cool. And so I was just going back and forth between those two spaces for like 5 to 8:30. Again, I was like, I have nowhere else to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
And and to just sit with it, and by taking time as well, all of a sudden I can just move a foot over to the right or left. And I'm like, oh, that's the angle.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's the beauty of being able to sit with something to really get an understanding of its organic space and how to move with it.
Well, you can be patient.
I was just going to say the same word.
The funny thing is, when you started off talking about this, nowadays, when everybody's got a phone that they can take photographs with, everybody thinks they're a photographer. But very few people have patience beyond the quick snapshot. So what you're having to do is sit and wait, which is exactly opposite of 99.99% of anyone who has a camera phone.
Yeah.
And you get these shots that you have to be at the right place, you have to have the right angle, there's composition to it. Certainly you have to find it. There's the discovery of the piece.
Yeah.
But then once you find it, you have to figure out how to shoot it. And all of that is very complex. And all of that is fascinating to me. In addition to you certainly seem to have themes to what you shoot. Like when we first met, I remember saying to you, these other pieces are nice, but we're a store that's about the West.
Yes.
And so you went out and shot all this stuff that is very Western.
Yep.
And I must say, I admired that you did that, and what you came back with was impressive, because I don't think I could have thought of these things, but as soon as I saw the images, they immediately were what I would have conjured up in my imagination, and they're perfect. So there are photographers, and then there are photographers, and the pieces that you have brought to us for the exhibit have just flabbergasted me.
Wow.
Because they're just so perfect.
Really
they're
excited.
so perfect for this store and the vibe that we have in here.
Wow.
And I just think our customers, they have to come to this show. They have to see this work, but I think you're just going to blow them away, because they're the bullseye of what we project in clothing and furnishings, and I think they're going to love it, for sure.
First off, everybody needs a Roger as a hype man.
I know.
Thank you.
He's really the best cheerleader.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And because that's, I go through this in a way of, I'm a very, I'm an emotive person. I am, I don't throw words like presence and awareness and vulnerability and all those catchphrase words around of like, that is how I've always lived my life, and that's how I've always felt inside, and now I get to harness that in life.
Yeah.
And I feel that it really shows in the work. People ask me if I'm a Texas photographer. I'm like, I'm based here.
Yeah.
So it makes it, it makes it very simple on
Right.
that side. And I try to show people, even things that are familiar for people, I try to show it to them in a different way.
Yeah.
And so, the idea of, the beauty of the pause and the sit and wait.
Mm-hmm.
I was down in Stockyards last week because I knew I kind of had to up my Fort Worth game, which, by the way, I think there's two things that I'm so stoked for this about, is that, I met y'all, I get to partner with y'all.
Yeah.
And it's right, this is like the absolute dreamscape backdrop to show this collection. And being a Tarrant County kid growing up, this is also the first time I'm showing in Fort Worth.
Wow.
So
that's great.
Yeah.
So it's definitely that of,
coming home.
Of coming home, of like, I live in Oak Cliff now, and so I've really just kind of focused in that area over the last year and a half growing business. And yet the amount of times that I come this way, I was just sharing with Roger, like, I grew up, my mom would take us to do her outdoor portrait sittings at Botanic Gardens. Like,
Moms
every other
ruin
night.
everything, don't they?
No, they didn't ruin anything, because
Yeah,
my
yeah.
brother and I, we just got a chance to be like, all right, peace out. We just got to
Running
run off in
around.
the woods
Yeah,
and everything.
yeah.
So Fort Worth has always had
Yeah.
this most amazing special place in my heart.
Yeah.
This part of Fort Worth has, because even though I grew up in Southwest Arlington, it was only like a 12-minute drive over to this
Yeah.
one. So, it's, I travel around quite a bit, and I love being an observer to others. And
Right.
you're so right in regards to people just get out and they just fire off some photos and then just go. I was in LA a couple of weeks ago because I was doing some work for a client that's another. I love the West.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love the expanse.
Right.
I love the colors. I love the Americana of it. And so I was in LA area and I was shooting everywhere between like Chinatown to Malibu. And just being the observer of people trying to just capture a moment.
Right.
And for me, I truly try to capture a feeling.
Yeah.
And so when it comes time to then really, when we look at size and everything, when it comes to printing, I really prefer to work in large scale because there is a sense of immersion of once you get in front of it. I mean, I tell people the hardest thing to try to convey to someone is what a 60 by 40 print looks like on an Instagram square.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's when you see it that they're like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So I want to take you to, it's that hope of can I take you to that place where I was and how I was feeling,
Yeah.
what music I was listening to,
Right.
what the wind was like, all the sensory factories that come into it, because then there's a lot of great, beautiful photographers out there, 100%. I take it akin to someone that goes to Arches National Park in Utah. They trek out with all this gear to the one spot.
Yeah.
You know the spot. It's where the arch is,
Yeah.
the sunrise hits, and everybody knows the spot. And it's beautiful, And also too, everyone's seen it.
Yeah.
And also as well, there's so many amazing stories bypassed just to get that shot.
Right.
And for me, it's
Right.
always finding those areas in between,
Mm-hmm.
that people might just overlook in that way.
Right.
Well, that's what I love. I think it's a model for really, you're sort of modeling, really getting to know, establishing a relationship with these, this sign or the tumbleweed guy. I mean, I think after a while, if you're out there for a couple hours waiting for light or whatever it is that you're waiting for, the magic moment, you've really gotten to know this sign really well, really intimately. And the when you talk about the journey, I think there is a lot of patience to be
For sure.
For
sure.
Practice in the journey. I think everybody's just so running around and cool and post it and be done on to the next thing. But this is what I like is just.
Well, it goes back to what I originally said. I've seen a lot of photographers. I've seen a lot of photography. Certainly, being on Instagram, you see a zillion photos every day. They're just photos of something, but they don't capture any sort of emotional essence of where they are. I think I would go back to what I had originally said. When you first came in here, you showed us some pieces, and they were beautiful, but they did not, to me, read the West.
Right.
And the next thing I know, we're doing it. We said, okay, this is what I would want to see in our store. And then the next thing I know, we start seeing these images, and they are not just beautiful images, but they are a bullseye of my mindset of what the West is. And I like this. This is certainly going to mean different things to different people, but it's certainly going to portray that Western vibe that is so much of our story, and everybody's going to have that same reaction to it. And I think I can't list you the names, but there's probably just a handful of photographers I've ever seen that have that ability to really tell a visual story. And after we saw these images, I thought to myself, well, you could drop this guy into any part of the world and he'd probably figure out what in those places portrayed the story of that place. And it would be certainly interesting if you were to have a show in, say, Birmingham, Alabama, a show of stuff in that region, and I'm sure it would sell out, or a show of the Northeast. I'm sure you would capture something that would portray the vibe of that part of the country. But the stuff you've produced for this is definitely the American West and very Americana and has that historic essence to it.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't see a sign like this made. You might see a sign like this made today, but it was a copy of that sign,
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
And then the other images you have, same thing. You look at those and at least I look at them and I say, okay, that's a bygone era in a beautiful part of the country that, the whole picture tells a great story.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why you and I connected so well.
Yeah.
I walked in and I was like, is this the original sign of Caravan of Dreams?
Yeah.
You're like, you know that place? I was like, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that appreciation of that
Mm-hmm.
and then going in and finding it. And I do that with quite a few clients in
Sure.
that way of getting clarity on what they're asking for, asking enough questions so that I can take what you're feeling, have an understand. Can I take it through my heart, up into my brain, through my eye, through the lens, so that when it comes out onto your print, you feel the exact same way when you see that
Right.
as if you were in that space.
Yeah. Oh,
Well,
beautifully
and
said.
for me, on top of all of that, as I mentioned to you before, I love driving west and
Yeah.
northwest out of here.
Yeah.
That is my heaven out
It
there.
is.
Yeah.
And essentially that's where you went.
Yeah.
And in my mind, after we heard you were going out to do this, I'm thinking to myself, man, that would just be so incredible just to get in the car and go out there and just photograph for a few weeks and with no specific time frame,
Yeah.
No
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 expectations.
lists.
and
no,
just
yeah.
enjoy the scenery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sure enough, you came back with these pieces, and I'm looking at those thinking, I've got to make it up to Wyoming. I've got to make it up to Montana. I've got to make it to these places. It just makes me want to travel.
You can make you want to get in your car.
Yeah.
So I think that said, if there's anything else we want to touch on, the show opens 28th of
28th.
October. We'll have some nibbles, live music, and how many pieces will you be bringing? How many in the show?
I think there's going to be around like 12 to 16 pieces.
Yeah.
So ranging from 24 by 24s all the way up to 60 by 40s.
Yeah,
So
right.
quite a range.
So we don't want to give away all the fun.
Yeah.
So,
No, we might have a few teasers
Yeah.
along the way
Okay.
Yeah.
to kind of show and everything. And like, look, I know it's Halloween weekend and everything, but like, what a great place to kind of stop in 5:30 to 8:30.
yep.
Come in. I'd love to meet y'all, especially being in the new part,
Yes.
an old new part.
An old new part. I
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
it.